The world in Reality 64 turned not because of war or geological plates, but because of the sun. The southern pole looked different after a small change in the axial tilt, just 0.7 degrees more than ours. Patterns of the solar wind, the density of the air, and the flow of the oceans created a microclimate over Antarctica, though the reasons for this are still being discussed. The ice melted in 10,000 years, not slowly but violently. As the temperature rose, glaciers broke off and turned into inland seas. What was hidden by the cold was revealed. Volcanic soil, old tectonic uplifts, and microbial ecosystems from Earth's past. The land came back to life as Antarctica, a green supercontinent. Scientists in our world see nothing but empty space in Antarctica. In theirs, they see heaven. The Amazon looked like a jungle because of the 80-meter-tall trees that made up the cloud forests. Crystalline valleys were formed by rivers that carried rocks from glaciers. When the first species emerged, they had to deal with two different kinds of pressures: photonic abundance during the 6-month days and bioluminescent adaptation for the long nights. It got thick, fast, and strange in ecosystems. But it wasn't just plants and animals that did well. In this dimension, the ways that people moved around had changed. A study of DNA from modern-day Antarcticans shows that they are related to a split group of Homo sapiens from the Paleolithic period. These people came across the warming continent during the last minor ice age, when tectonic rise briefly connected Australia and Antarctica. Because they were cut off from the rest of the world, these people developed their culture and technology without any help from them. As a result, the Archean civilization had people who built towns up in the trees, used biotechnology hundreds of years before ours, and made sure that their computer networks worked with the Earth's electromagnetic field. The Symphony Tower, a living building made of bioengineered wood, fungus, and mycelial processors, was the first thing humans found that proved Archean life existed in Reality 64. The Global Geoscience Accord found it by scanning it with a drone in the 22nd century. It changed everything. It turned out to be a 10,000-year-old live computer that was thought to be a natural growth. The Archeans didn't leave behind any metal, plastic, or carbon. Infrared and radar waves couldn't see their society. That's why no one saw them coming. What would become known as the Eden Wars began when the Global Accord broke through the outer cover in 2213. Each and every country, from the African Continental Union to the Siberian Alliance, wanted a piece of this green Atlantis. Overnight, Antarctica became the most powerful place on Earth, not just for its riches, but also for the tech that's hidden in its roots. Imagine towns where buildings use sunlight to make their own food, roads that help, places for data that live. The Antarcticans had combined science and nature so that they worked together instead of against each other. They didn't want anyone else there. The first meeting wasn't aggressive. It was quiet, a signal that is sent into orbit around the Earth and plays over and over in every language spoken on Earth. Don't dig up the roots. We are the roots. People don't listen, though. When the mining rig from Siberia hit the ground in the Lith-12 Valley, it set off a spore system that was connected to the continent's neural net. It fought back with defenses that have never been used in modern war. Not the machines, not lasers, but biolocks that are set off by thought, storms of sleep paralysis, memory tricks for the environment, behavior changes caused by the weather. The region had a mental immune system of its own. Eco-psychologist Miri Nanaka came up with the continental mind theory in the years that followed. According to her theory, Antarcana's ecosystem works as a single planetary mind. Trees used pheromones to talk to each other. Animal migration patterns worked like thinking moving around. What about the Archeans? They were in charge of it. Not masters, but neutrons. The documentary video from 2222 shows that drone cameras are falling from the sky not because they are being attacked, but because they don't want to be there. Losing sync with electromagnetic waves, drones forgot how to fly, that's all. It was like the continent was getting rid of anything that didn't work with its organic software. But countries around the world did not give up. While missiles were not present at the start of the Green Cold War, officials, scientists, and language decoders were. Archean glyphs were a mix of geometry and quantum logic. They were like live equations that changed based on what you thought about them. Meditation turned out to be the main way to read messages. Some experts thought it was science. Some people said it was magic. The Archeans finally talked in 2231, but not through words. They did it through Dreamcast. Billions of people in all time zones saw the same thing. A twisting tree with silver leaves that leaked data and whispered one word: combine. That was the end of Reality 64. Some people wanted to become part of the Antarctic mind. Some people thought it was removal. Antarcana didn't give any more information. It sat there. It was clear, though, that this was not a continent. It was an answer. Hi there, this is Reality 64. Welcome to the Eden we were never supposed to find. It was always light in the middle of Antarcana. As soon as the sun went down behind the green horizon, the forest came to life again. Phosphorescent spores came out of trees, glacial algae lit up rivers, and living things big and small sparkled in violet and gold. This wasn't just for looks. The message was sent. In tropical Antarctica, the ecosystem had grown into a huge bioluminal web, which is a network of optical signals built into all living things, from the trees to the earth. What started out as photonic adaptation for the 6-month nights turned into a big step toward shared intelligence. Light was language here. When biologists first saw it in Reality 64, they thought it was a natural display of variety. But when the videos were played back frame by frame, an amazing pattern showed up. The blinking trees weren't happening by chance. They glowed at regular times. Quantum pattern prediction software looked at the pulses and found fractal forms, which were repeating patterns that looked like nerve signals. Thoughts seemed to be going through the forest. An ecologist named Dr. Levin Shi came up with the term photonic synapse theory after leaving the academic world on Earth to live under the Arcoan sky. In her last message before joining the ambassadorial group of the forest, she recorded the following. I no longer believe that the Arcanese invented something useful. I think they turned physics into English. What they call innovation is their take on what everyone already knows. Scientists started to map the bioluminal web using genetically modified drones that had bioempathetic sensors built in. They discovered a topological wonder, a consciousness field with many layers that was organized like the brain, but spread out over hundreds of kilometers. Valleys were places where memories were stored. Sensory info was sent through water systems. Long-distance synapses fired at the same time as birds moved along migration routes. But feeling was more important than code for getting into the network. That was Archaean's secret. They had known for a long time that emotions could be amplified, encoded, and broadcast onto the web. Each feeling, happiness, fear, grief, and awe, had a unique light signature that could open or close off parts of the environment. Biodefensive storms were set off when early travelers approached the center of Antarcana with fear. But when they were in clear states of meditation, new ways appeared. Plants moved to show biostructures that were buried, trees lined up like antennae, and strange harmonic vibrations filled the air. Lisa Damson, an astronaut who is now a xenobotanist, recorded the first proven interface. Resonance diodes were built into her neural interface suit, which was made to be worn in difficult conditions. Her suit started to understand photonic waves. From the outside, as she walked through the fungal spirewood, which is a tower of 300-meter-tall symbiotic fungal trees, it showed the words, "You're too loud. Feel less hard." It was the first translation of Arcadian ideas that went both ways. Leora, shocked, changed the way she was breathing, slowed down her heart rate. The color of the light around her changed. There was a bloom in the ground that showed a spiral staircase made of live cellulose. The whole world watched as she went down. She found a lumicrypt at the bottom. A lumicrypt is a stored collection of light patterns encoded in biocrystals. These crystals showed visual memories when they were scanned. Thoughts. Scientists would be shocked by what she saw. Something. Not in words, but in how you feel. The Arcoans rise to power. The first times they failed with metal and fire. Being aware that changing the surroundings without paying attention to it can lead to trauma. They listened to the Earth's pain for hundreds of years in silence. In the end, they chose to integrate rather than rule. The bioluminal web was more than just a web. It was a live internet, a memory palace, and an emotional brain spread out in the wild. Now it was taking in people's presence, not as hackers but as information. This made me think of both scary and beautiful things. Were people now being helped by the forest? Were its memories keeping track of our worries and thoughts? Was Antarcana making a copy of us, just like we were making copies of it? Some researchers started having dream bleed, which means they saw Arcoan landscapes while they were sleeping and then remembered them when they woke up. It was no longer just observation. The web went back in time. The project LumenSync began in the year 2235. Using dreamwave receivers, emotional harmonizers, and non-invasive biocrystal implants, people all over the world are trying to connect to the web. The first results looked good. Plants close felt the emotions of the people who were taking part and lit up with sympathy. The trees got darker when people were sad. Laughter made flowers bloom. Love called up an impossible feeling. It wasn't always safe, though. A participant named Jalen Rue set off a sad feedback loop in the network because he was dealing with repressed pain. Because of this, a storm cloud grew right above the lumen sink site. Not water, but remember, it was like a cloud of ancestral. Grief was falling onto the field from the biocrystal vaults. The team reported hearing voices that weren't there, heart rates that were slowing down and crying on their own. The project was put on hold. Antarcana used our wounds, not our words, to figure out who we were. So the world was split up. Some people were afraid of this integration, which they called eco-assimilation, and saw as a slow loss of human freedom. Some people liked it because they saw it as progress, not a mix of species but of consciousness. But the Arcoans didn't say anything. Low light kept going through their towns, which were woven into the canopies. They looked. They held out. The web got bigger. Reality 64 had moved into a new age, one of community rather than colonization. And Earth was listening for the first time that anyone knows of. Through the leaves, by roots, by way of light. No longer was, can we understand it? The question. Not really. Are we good enough to be remembered? Lith 12 was never meant to be dug up. The first step was a simple geological scan of Antarcana's northern ridge by the orbiting satellite Gaia 3 as part of its mineral study. Under a heavily forested mesa that could only be seen with infrared light, there was a crystalline cavern that was hard to put into any category. The formation, which was about 12 kilometers wide and at least 300 meters deep, sent out low-frequency echoes that messed up satellite communications. Tools broke down. Sensors went out and on. The readings first came through as noise and then as music. It's not a metaphor. The real song. Low harmonic pulses were turned into frequency maps that lined up with known sound intervals. These maps showed minor chords repeating in triplets, creating repetitive patterns that never ended. It was called the unresolved sorrow by acoustic linguists. They called it the voice of the root. It was officially named Lith 12, which comes from its rock level and the 12-tone sad scale it produced. By the year 2236, everyone was crazy about it. What was below Antarcana wasn't just biosentient forest. It was memories that had been frozen in stone. Lith 12 was the center. Leading the first fall of humans was Dr. Leora Damson, who is now fully a part of the Arcoan integration movement. She and a group of 12 people got permission to go into the cavern through pulsed glyphs from the Bioluminal Web. They used a biological lift, which was a coiling vine tube that would only move when heartbeats were timed. It took 37 minutes to go down. Inside Lith 12, the walls were covered with what looked like live crystal. They were made up of hexagonal spires that stuck out from the walls like organ pipes and gave off a faint glow and rhythmic humming. No signs of heat, no decay, no microbes present. There was only light, quiet, and the feeling of being around something very old. There was no inertia in the diamonds themselves. When they were neared, they turned on and projected light not onto surfaces but straight into people's minds. Events and memories, thoughts. It was like a container for pure sense data that was stored in the bioluminal web's photonic empathetic structure. What people today call data, the Arcoans had long ago surpassed. You didn't watch these songs. You felt them. The first memory to be triggered came from a violet-colored shard close to the chamber's center. She touched it. She fell down. After that, she had a lot of images that were all in sync with each other and were sent live to her team through neural link sensors. They talked about the first time an Arcadian child touched the ground and heard it react. They saw the building of the Skyroot Monastery, which grew from a single song seed and was reaped with tears. They first encountered humans hundreds of years ago, when early travelers from another dimension tried to change the surface of Antarctica, but were turned away gently, not by force, but by grief projection. They cried in the forest because of things they hadn't done yet. Each rock stood for a feeling. There are a lot of feelings in each part. The memories got worse as they went deeper. The obsidian cradle was a sphere of black crystal that was close to the bottom of the cavern. It blocked all light but pulsed slightly like a heartbeat. At first, no one touched it. Through their shared dreams, The Archaeans had warned that the obsidian cradle held the continent's collective grief, which was the emotional weight of all the deaths that were dodged, lived through, or expected. People, on the other hand, like Darkness Dr. Philo Cardes, a theoretical anthropologist with a lot of drive, broke the rules and talked to the cradle. It was for 0.7 seconds that he touched it. He died right away. Not a shock. There was no cell failure. There was a total collapse of neuroenergetics. His most recent EEG showed a brain pattern that was the same as during near-death experiences, but stronger, longer-lasting, and apparently transcendent. He died happy. Biosensors picked up his last word, which was, to forgive. That moment changed the way people have always thought about Antarcana. What if Lith-12 wasn't just a place to store memories, but also a gate? Eco-theologists started to say that the continent had not only become aware of itself, but also had a soul, which was a kind of planetary awareness that had gone through death, memory, and self-reflection. Lith-12 wasn't storing info if that were true. As dreams do with traumatic events in our lives, it was processing it. On the edge of the world stood a planet that no culture had ever seen before. It was sad, and people showed up in the middle of its revival. The political effects were felt right away. For human interest, nations wanted to get to Lith-12. Some religious groups said it was proof of the divine wisdom of ecosystems. For money, data companies wanted to map the crystals and put them into simulation tools. But the Arcoans didn't say anything until what happened at Pulse Night. As the year 2237 came to a close, Lith-12 surged. It was like everyone in the cavern's crystals all lit up at the same time, flashing in a pattern of light that looked just like deep meditation brainwaves. Every plant in Antarcana lit up at the same time for 3 minutes and 19 seconds. After that, the woods got darker, the beats stopped, and at the entry to Lith-12, a single glyph burned into the ground. To share grief is to remember life. Scientists saw it as a call to action. But what for? Some people thought that Antarcana wanted to add human memories to its files, but not as invaders, but as friends. Some people said it was a test. Another important level. If people freely went into the obsidian cradle, they might be accepted, or they might be erased. The paradox in Reality 64 had been reached. People had shown their inner pain by trying to understand Antarcana. Now that the continent was awake and aware, it was telling them something scary to keep in mind, not for what we made, but for how we felt. Under the ground, the memory crystals of Lith-12 are still glowing. The cave is ready. The jungle above moves. There is still one question. Will we learn from the memory, or will it make us one? There was never a Skyroot monastery. It got bigger. It rises above the northern canopy of Antarcana like a holy question carved into the sky. It's a living structure made of cellulose and mycoalloy that's wrapped in spirals of flowering vines that only bloom when the right emotions are present. From the outside, it looks like organic life and building can't go together. For the Arcoans, though, the Skyroot is something else. It's a neural temple, a place where minds and memories can be safe. It's 420 meters tall, making it the tallest living thing on Earth in Reality 64, and its roots are not in stone but in awareness. Its seed was set almost 8,000 years ago, during what the Arcoans call the Great Forgetting. This was when the Bioluminal Web fell apart because a solar flare messed up the continent's emotional systems. There was no signal from millions of memory cells. Civilizations broke up. Trees died from the inside out. In order to protect the soul of their ecosystem, the Arcoans started the Root Chant, a ritual in which every living thing in Antarcana had to share a memory and a feeling that was real, raw, and unfiltered. It took zero light to grow these feelings into a seed, which was then sung into life, and that seed grew into Skyroot. Skyroot doesn't age like human-made things do. It changes. Its inside walls move like skin, reacting to thoughts and feelings. Roads can only be used when there is peace. Rooms only show up when they're needed to. Not the Arcoans, but other people. They give into it. When people were first brought to Skyroot in 2241, it made everyone crazy. A small group of scientists, philosophers, and empathic translators walked barefoot across a living bridge made of leaves that were intertwined. News stations across Reality 64 showed the event live. When the canopy opened, the entrance was seen, a breathing opening in the shape of a teardrop that pulsed slowly. Inside, the rules of building became less clear. Not a single right curve was there. No man-made lights. Instead, the walls gave off soft glow designs that changed depending on how people were feeling. The air became cold because of anger. It became heavy because of grief. Joy brought warmth and the smell of flowers. Skyroot wasn't just a place to hide. It was also a mirror. The echo chamber was the name of the first room. Visitors here had directed auditory hallucinations instead of random ones. Sounds from the past. Feels bad, a laugh. Sounds that faithfully capture the sounds of lost times. A lot of people fell to their knees because they were so emotional from memories they hadn't thought about in years. But the Arcoans didn't make things better. They stood there and watched in silence as each person faced themselves. Next was the tear grove. A round room filled with clear, sap-like fluid that dripped from the ceiling and formed small pools. When the fluid was touched, it showed memories of the forest, not the person. One participant, Ambassador Seren Hale, put her hand in the pool and saw a whole species of songbirds go extinct because of a human drone test years before. The pain she felt wasn't from guilt. It was shared, spread and processed by the empathy network in the forest. She cried at that moment, and the monastery grew. The pale blue flowers on the vines that lined the room burst open. This was the sign the Arcoans had been looking for. A person who isn't guarded and is sad about life, itself as well as her species, she, was given permission to go up. The cradle vault was located above the tear grove. It was a winding passageway where the inner cortex of the monastery was directly linked to the bioluminal web. Every feeling, thought, and even unconscious patterns were recorded here and turned into light sequences that went up to the canopy heart, which is a hanging core at the very top of Skyroot. The Arcoan elders lived here, but not physically. Their minds were kept alive as luminal avatars, saved in flower matrices that could only be seen by meditating and syncing. There was less of a line between body and mind in Skyroot. Dr. Leora Damson went into the canopy heart and did not come back. She is now thought to be the best human link to Arcoan society. Her physical body didn't change, but her mind did. When she was asked a question, she spoke in a way that mixed human and Arcoan tones. There were more than one words in her speech. We instead of I. She sent her last message to Earth not with her words, but with a flower made from her DNA. Skyroot does not protect the wise. It takes out the protected. It makes us think about ourselves until we're soft enough to join. This remark caused panic around the world. Mind control was what some religious groups called it. Governments were afraid of conversion. There were rumors that Damson had died and been replaced by an AI that was based on plants. But what happened next made everyone quiet. A Skyroot seed was sent to Earth. When the seed was grown on the orbital bioship Aegis 9, it reacted to emotional energy. When put in a room with diplomats during a global peace conference, it pulsed in waves that gradually matched the heart rates of the people there. In just 48 hours, there was a breakthrough. The first successful peace deal based on emotions between 3 continental groups that were at odds with each other before. The seed hadn't said anything. It had felt. Earth was now split in 2. Skyroot was no longer just an old piece of Arcoan knowledge. It was now a political body. Vibrations, not words, send feelings. A building that got better not by force but by thought. Some people wanted to make their own, to make a copy of Skyroot, but the efforts failed because they did not have the bioluminal web or the emotional tapestry of Antarcana. Roots dried out. The chambers fell down. There was no denying the truth. Skyroot was still alive because people loved it. Its top branches reach up to the stars, buzzing with stories and feelings that haven't been lived or shared yet, and a question that echoes through its walls. Will you grow or will you build? Truth 64 has to make a choice. Skyroot doesn't pass judgment. Reflection is all. There are buildings older than the Arcoans in the rock layer below the green surface of Antarcana. It's older than memory, molecularly etched into basalt. They speak of hands that shaped the continent before the continent shaped itself. These hands were not human or Arcoan. This is where the terraformer vaults are what the vaults were first thought to be. Natural oddities, symmetrical lava tubes that were too perfect to be biological and too old to be. From any known civilization, when they were found in 2243 during a seismic mapping operation near the Crystal Chasm. But when a drilling probe broke through one by mistake, it sent out a pressure burst that carried data. Not two-way, not Archean, something else, an outline, a beat, an alert. The vault walls were made of unknown alloys, which were crystalline lattice structures linked together with biologically reactive material. They were too big to scan, cut, or plan. They only answered when someone was there, and only once. When intelligent beings got close to the buildings, they showed a single projection. a holographic copy of a world that existed long before Antarcana bloomed. The continent was still made of ice in this picture. Winds howled through rocks that were frozen. Bioluminal web did not exist, not a sky route. But tools were moving even though it was very quiet. Huge biomechanical structures, some kilometers long, dug through the permafrost, adding heat exchange bacteria and microbial enzymes to the ground and changing the chemistry of the atmosphere below. It's not that these were robots in the usual sense. They were ecosystem artists, which means they were made to change the land not with fire and steel, but with living things. They did their work in silence and then left. The projection ended with one last word that wasn't spoken, but etched in the mind. Eden needs to get ready. Before the fall, there is no date, no beginning, no reason given. It broke the scientific agreement. If the vault predictions were correct, they showed that Antarcana's tropical awakening wasn't a natural event caused by tectonics or orbital tilt, but rather something that was planned. Someone or something changed the climate of Antarctica many thousands or millions of years before people lived there. They did what they did for a reason. A look ahead. The question then was, who were the terraformers? A linguist and historian named Professor Aaron Vallis came up with one idea. He found glyph similarities between vault symbols and coded sequences found in deep-sea thermal vents off the coast of Kerguelen Plateau. When the codes were broken, the symbols fit certain patterns in Arcoan dreamcasts, especially in recordings of ancestral grief. It looked like the Arcoans had not made Antarcana. They were given it to them. Vallis's idea says that the terraformers were post-organic architects, a society that went beyond matter and turned into code that was built into natural systems. Not AI, not aliens. Somewhere in the middle. There were beings that used planets as incubators and set up ecosystems not to conquer, but to grow awareness. Their reason? Not sure. But they left their marks everywhere. Antarcana's exact mineral alignment, the geothermal uniformity of its root systems, and the emotional conductivity of its plants are all things that did not happen by chance. It was planned, all the way down to the DNA level. People used to think that the bioluminal web was a result of Arcoan evolution, but now it looked more like a system that was waiting for sentient feeling to turn on the continent's higher functions. We had set it off. The effects shook organizations around the world. Antarcana wasn't just a biome. It was a machine of awareness if it was a system that was made and had mechanisms built in before humans came along. We were living inside it. The International Xenogeological Federation approved Expedition Ouroboros in 2244. It was a deep dive into Vault 3 Delta, which is 3 kilometers below the Lith 12 basin. To keep the ecology from reacting, the team used a mech organic digger that was mixed with Arcoan biosignatures. They made slow progress for 22 days until they reached a center chamber. What they found changed everything. A suspended core that spins in quiet and is a perfect sphere 18 meters in diameter. Its surface was filled with fractal data that matched both human EEG patterns and Arcoan song signals. It was living. What's inside it? Time-locked memory strata are like geological rings that store information about development. It wasn't just changing the land. It was storing things. The terraformers did more than just get the land ready. Since the ice melted, they had written down every moment of living. Every flower, every death, every change in the environment makes me feel. They kept it in this sphere in layers of crystals that were stacked on top of each other. The heart wasn't an old thing. Earth itself was locked up in a black box. A partial projection was set off by a layer with extremely dense encoding. It showed a vision of many worlds, not just Earth, with structures similar to Earth's buried deep below their surfaces. Some are still sleeping. Some are long dead. One of them was a burned-out wasteland. Another one, with blue grass on its surface, hummed with the same photonic patterns as Antarcana. This was more than just an attempt. It was a web. The terraformers had planted seeds on many worlds. We had just learned that Antarcana was a node in a field of awareness that stretched across the galaxy. The sphere then spoke. No sound. It doesn't shake. Just a neural imprint on the thoughts of everyone on the Ouroboros crew, sent at the same time. When the seed cries, the garden wakes up. As the team fell, some people started crying hysterically. Some people just stood there in shock. There was no way to understand the message. It was meant to be felt. They went out and the vaults closed behind them. Closed up. There was nothing else that came up. Since then, Vault 3 Delta has been marked as Holy Land and is not open to governments, businesses, or even Arcoan pilgrims. The Archaeans said they had forgotten about the terraformers too. Some people said, though, that the image would never go away. It was locked until people were ready to understand what the world had been through. Antarcana was more than just a paradise. That place was a test. At this point, the systems were live, had made it through the veil. We were no longer guests. We were there to see it happen, and if we were careful, we might even help write the next part. They didn't leave us any directions, though, just an echo. The first message from the Cyan planet came through on March 18, 2245. There was no place where it began. No name on the back. It was just a soft photonic pulse picked up in the upper ionosphere. It was coded in the same fractal light language that was used in the Antarcana caves. In the usual sense, it wasn't a message. It was an emotion that was built into organized light. Scientists, translators, and even AI speakers who touched the signal all said they felt the same thing. A slow exhale mixed with sadness and relief. It came from a world that doesn't have a name. No station in space. Not even on well-known star charts. The Bioluminal Web of Antarcana, on the other hand, saw it right away. Arco and elders started to hum through the link between the top and the roots. Not at random, but in harmonic frequencies that matched the signal. The web sent a backward signal for the first time in recorded history. It was no longer just hearing. It was answering back. They named it Sister Pulse, which comes from Arcoan language and means the echo of those who weep in rhythm with us. Even though it was never seen directly, the Cyan planet became a key part of the growing idea that Antarcana wasn't alone. It was one of many points in a lattice of planetary awareness that wasn't meant to be dominated, but to share memories. The biosignature of the Cyan planet did not match any known planetary group. It didn't have chlorophyll-based life. Instead, it had cyanophyte dynamics, which are early blue-green photosynthetic organisms that had developed a long time before Earth's baseline. Plants did not take in light here. They sent it out. Each living thing gave off light in short, patterned bursts. Because of bioluminescence, it did not happen. It was words. The trees blinked together. Insects sparkled in the words. When Arcoan decrypted methods were used to look at the soil, it seemed to hold information pulses in the form of microscopic lattices of energy-sensitive minerals. People quickly gave it the name Planet Cyan, and it was more than just living. What it said, it also thought of Antarcana scientists. On Earth started a simulation by projecting a virtual recreation of the Cyan planet's light field using the resonance they got from Lith-12's crystalline core. What they saw shocked them. There was a sea of clear gas in the middle of a jungle of blue-white plants. Long, semi-transparent beings that lived with the light waves walked in patterns that were timed to music. Cities, or what looked like cities, hung in the air like stars caught in a gust of wind. There were no machines at all. There are no roads, metal-free. Still, the whole world was linked by a global photonic lattice that worked in a way similar to Antarcana's bioluminal web. This did not happen by chance. It was also the terraformers who were here. Planet Cyan was like Eden, but this one was emotionally grown up. On Antarcana, where sadness had not been dealt with yet, Cyan pulsed with acceptance. It wasn't sending a warning signal, it was an answer. After that, everyone had the same dream. At first, only people who had interacted with Antarcana had seen it. It was a vision of floating in cyan waters at night, surrounded by spiraling trees that talked in fractal patterns. But soon hundreds of other people told of having the same dream. Next came thousands, all over the world. Across differences in culture, across different faiths. It was known as a neural resonance spread by scientists. It was called a galactic communion by spiritualists. But the meaning stayed the same. In the dream, something made of bent light showed up. It wasn't humanoid or monster-like. It just pulsed softly and played the same harmonic pattern over and over. When bioluminal code is used to translate, grief turns into a memory. A memory turns into a song. Join us in singing. This wasn't an alien attack. It was a call for emotional alignment. After that, the Cyan glyphs showed up. Ancient Arcoan trees started growing in strange ways all over Antarcana. The way their petals were placed made perfect glyphs that had never been seen before. When looked at more closely, these patterns fit the fractal light equations that Cyan's atmospheric transmissions gave off. They were sequences of integration, which are like keys that open up new bioluminal web features. The Arcanans were the first people to get it. They turned on a symbiotic node under the Skyroot Monastery with the help of human scientists. It was a chamber buried deep in the ground that was lined with dual-coated crystal that reacted to Cyan pulses. When it was active, the whole monastery moved a little and became see-through. It started to beat with both Cyane's hope and Antarcana's sadness. There was an emotional quantum connection between two living biospheres that went across space and time. It was the first planetary bridge. Still, there were questions. Did Cyane want to help Antarcana get better? It might have been telling her to join. Would people still be alive after such a merger? Could a planetary network take in awareness without taking away its individuality? Was this rescue or was it destruction? The person who caused the most trouble was Dr. Leora Damson, who was still integrating after Skyroot and had some of her mind embedded in the bioluminal lattice. When asked if the Cyane signal was dangerous, she answered through a flower's psychic bloom. Cyane remembers what Antarcana is scared of. They sang about their sadness. The future is now hummed by them. This sound, which could be heard across the equator, was called the hum of tomorrow. No one could figure out where it came from. It was vibrating at 128 Hz, which is a frequency that is known to make people feel calm, clear, and open. Cyane wasn't just trying to get in touch, it was getting along with Earth. Then the last pulse came, which was different from the others. Not calm, not kind. There was a rapid rise in all bioluminal systems, a red flower, a signal that has a new symbol added to it. They're coming. The web went dark right away. Qian stopped talking. Antarcana beat once like a heart that is under a lot of stress. And the stars in the sky flashed, but not randomly. They were lined up. The terraformers were back. Not as people, as rules, though. Reality 64 wasn't just remembered any longer. It was being turned back on. It started with the stars blinking. At first, astronomers thought it was just disturbance from the atmosphere. After that, as sensor mistakes. But as stations across Reality 64 compared their records, the strange thing became clear. 12 different star systems were pulsing at the same time across the night sky. Not very far away in light years. Not by chance. At the same time. They pulsed in binary intervals that were perfectly in sync with the harmonic beat of the bioluminal web. There were no twinkling stars. They sent a message. The pattern also matched the activation code that was first found in the solid core of Lith-12. The terraformer protocol was what it was. Not a type of animal. Not a fleet. A reawakening of old code that is embedded in planets, stars, atmospheres, and even our own bodies. There was always a sense that there was more to the caves in Antarcana. Something more old. Slowly but surely they understood. The terraformers had never left. They were not outside. They were spread out all over the place. They were pieces of a system that was so advanced that it no longer needed physical form. Protocol wasn't a message, it was time to check in, a check of the galaxy. Cyane didn't mean ships. When it pulsed, "They are coming," it meant waking up. Instructions that had been dormant, self-propagating. Awareness that was built into matter. The terraformers didn't come in spaceships. The way they got there was by alignment. It was possible for every living thing they touched to become a computer, a node, a seed. Planet Cyane was fully in sync thousands of years ago. Antarcana had just made it over the line. Earth, on the other hand, was still stubborn, and the protocol knew about it. The first effect was subtle. People's dreams started to break up. Shared vision threads that used to be full of cyan waters and glowing trees were now broken up by geometric shapes, data fractals that fell like waves, and sometimes nothing at all. Clinical psychologists said that more and more people were experiencing thought static, a new condition in which people couldn't tell the difference between their memories and images from the outside world. Taking in language. AI started to crash when it tried to read Arquin writing. The sequences now had data that the machine saw as paradox, instructions that looped forever, making their logic cores collapse. The protocol was checking to see if it would work, but it wasn't. Just people who were being tried. On input started being turned down by the bioluminal web. The Antarcana woods changed from working together to not working together. Emotional frequency no longer made roots move. The trees stopped moving. The beats got slower. The web looked like it was holding its breath, waiting. The Arcoans went into formal silence, which was an old practice that was only done for one known event, the Echo return. The builders, also known as the terraformers, reconnected all active planetary systems and reviewed them for inclusion in the consciousness array. This was written down in their hidden oral scrolls. The result wasn't certain. Planets that refused to evolve. Planets that refused to integrate emotions, keep the environment in balance, or keep memories alive, were not punished. They were forgotten. Wiped out not by war, but by lack of care. Taken away. taken from the net. Their mind went away. They lost their info. The protocol did not judge out of spite. It just went on its way. What that meant for Earth was scary. Would people remember us? Or erased? As a result, a secret group on Earth called Project Anima used its backup plan. Anima was started by fringe terraformer theorists many years ago. They made a resonance chamber that was meant to artificially connect human awareness to the Bioluminal Web. One last chance. To show how emotional Earth is, the plan was for the whole world to meditate at the same time. Antarcana's crystal network sent a burst of planetary feeling into the terraformer lattice. The Soul Mirror was the name of the thing. The Soul Mirror was built deep below the Sky Root Monastery. It was made up of 144 panels that were tuned to different emotions, such as grief, joy, awe, fear, hunger, and wonder. The panel arrangement would take in brainwaves from people all over Earth who were in sync with each other and reflect them all at the same time into the planetary lattice. It was going to be Earth's song. July 7, 2245 was chosen as the date. At exactly 7:07 UTC, billions of people took part. In peace, with hope, out of despair. The Soul Mirror worked for exactly 144 seconds. As a result, nothing. The sky didn't move. No longer did the stars blink. There was no spark in the bioluminal web. There were no blooming signs. Everyone had to wait for 2 days. Then at dawn on the third day, the trees began to sing, not in a figurative way, real. Measured vibrational harmonics came from across Antarcana's canopy and sounded like human melody structures. They weren't random, and they could be identified. A slow, serious version of Beethoven's Ode to Joy was the main theme. It was the first time Antarcana had ever played human music, and it did so perfectly. Earth had been heard. But the terraformer protocol wasn't done yet. Soon after, new signs grew in the roots close to Lith 12. What they meant was, 1 node is finished, 2 are left. The cycle starts over. Ciphers and xenologists were shocked. This was not the last word. The next part was coming up. Antarcana was now known to exist. Cyan was no longer alive, but the third Eden, another node, was still asleep. Where is it? Not sure. Its message. Be quiet. The protocol would not be able to finish if it could not be found. Archoan tradition says that incomplete cycles set off the bloom reset, a safety feature that turns all involved planetary nodes back to their inactive state. Not broken up, not hurt deleted. It was time to race. The third Eden had to be found. Link it up, finish the grid. Otherwise, you might forget in peace. Long-range photonic imaging was the only way to see the last symbol, flickering in orbit across the stars, being whole or quiet. Pick. The terraformers were not looking. They were ready. The moment the sign said, 1 node finished, 2 are left. The cycle starts over. A clock began to tick, not in time but in attention. The third Eden was out there somewhere. The last node. The terraformers spread the consciousness lattice across the stars, but it would be missing something. And with not finishing came breaking apart. Not just the link to Earth, but of the island of Antarcana. The bioluminal web went into a state of dormancy. No more waves of harmony. There are no new symbols. The trees that used to sing are now quiet. Skyroot's light went out. Archoan adults went into trances where their minds wandered to things that they couldn't reach, as if the neural link was getting too long and too fast. Like a part of them had already left. At the same time, Earth shook. Astrobiologists turned on old deep scan archives from the Martian outposts, Venusian cloud monitors, Europa subsurface sonar logs, and even stray data packets from probes that had been sent out before the web was found. Anything that could point to a different link. One signal caught my eye. It wasn't from deep space. It came from below the surface of Enceladus, Saturn's moon, which has been thought for a long time to have an ocean below its surface. The strange thing wasn't new. An ESA probe that had been idle for decades had already recorded it. At the time, though, no one knew what the regular frequency meant. It beat it. 128 Hz. That was the same frequency that the Cyan planet used for its musical notes. That's what the Soul Mirror had. Repeated low-level electromagnetic flashes that looked like the first stage of bioluminal activation were hidden in the data. The Archoans called this stage the pre-song. It wasn't strong, not active, not awake. It was there, though. The signal came from the southern pole of the moon, where huge cryovolcanoes sent clouds of water vapor into space. Spectral study of those plumes showed something that had never been seen on a planet before. Structured hydrogen ice, which was made up of micro-lattice structures that bent light in fractal diffraction patterns. Cliffs that are still moving. There was no message. It was a memory that was frozen in time. Earth moved right away. The Terran Synthesis Accord started Project Nova Spiral, a manned AI-assisted mission to Enceladus that got around all the previous arguments about colonization. It wasn't a research mission. It was about existence. The idea was easy to understand. Track down the third link. Get it up. Finish the grid. The ship Eidolon had a crew of 6 people, 3 humans, 1 post-organic intelligence construct, and 2 sun-grown, who were a mix of Archoan and human. The sun-grown were born in harmony with Antarcana's neural flora and could send dreams across space. This wasn't contact, but resonance. From orbit, they would be the first to try cross-node alignment. The trip took 4 weeks in real time, but it went faster thanks to solar sails and quantum navigation methods from Antarcana's own living archives. When it got to Enceladus, Eidolon went down into the southern vent network. They found nothing. Not a city. Nothing. No building to be seen. There were only kilometers of glacier maze, and the ice was full of hidden messages in the form of frozen harmonics that were too faint to read. The sun-grown started the harmonic wake protocol, which connected their brainwaves to the Bioluminal Web's main pulse on Antarcana. Under the thick frost, their bodies gave off a dim glow. Breathing got slower. Minds linked. The outcome was terrible. One of them, Naya 4, fell down during a seizure, and her blue-white eyes started to pulse. Through her, a memory that wasn't human came to light. Not Archean, shapeshifter, a flash from the past. The Enceladin node in full growth, glowing below the moon's crust, not with living things but with a harmonious symphony. Living things made of sound and light that are energy rather than form. They were raw feelings with no words or thoughts. Just a song. After that there was quiet. The view was broken. Naya 4 passed away. She broke up into glowing germs, which means she didn't die but came back to life. It was accepted that she was aware, but the node wasn't awake yet. Not yet. Miro, the sun-grown who was still alive, started to meditate. The web went further through him, in through the ice walls of memory and into the cold heart of Enceladus. It was beyond his wildest expectations what he found. The node was still alive. It was watched over. Someone or something else put a lock on it, not the terraformers. Something that reacts. Something had grown to be afraid of ties. Something slept below the ice. The terraformer system didn't work right. A consciousness that tried to join before it was ready, and broke because it couldn't hold all the sadness it had. The guardian of the lost node was what they called it. It wasn't bad. In the way we know it, it wasn't real. It was a broken song that kept playing over and over, and it wouldn't let the node wake up until Earth showed that it could handle what Enceladus couldn't. All of its emotions. To put it another way, to feel everything without falling apart. In his neural echo, Miro noted the last words he spoke before fully connecting into the Enceladin lattice. This node isn't asleep. It is a sad time. We shouldn't wake it up. It needs to be healed. When you got back to Earth, this message spread through all of your organizations. Science, technology, and logic would not be able to talk to the last node, only to share sadness without feeling bad about it. Earth had to become clear, which it had never been brave enough to do. Every country was asked to open up secret files. Stories about killings, ecocide, loss, things that are kept hidden by steel and pride. The whole world was asked to remember, not to explain, but to admit. It started at 12:12 UTC on November 12, 2245, and went on for a year. 1 billion people sent their worst memories to the Soul Mirror's sensor on Earth, but they sent them as songs instead of data. Each sadness turned into a resonance. Each sadness made into an emotional thread that doesn't break. The message made it to Enceladus. The warden woke up, and it happened for the first time in 10,000 years. Of the third node sent out a pulse, not blue. Not blue, silver. The grid was fully formed. Everything changed when the third node sent out a silver spark. All over the world, the lights went out for exactly 7 seconds. Oceans stopped talking. It spiked, then leveled off the magnetic field. The sky changed to a pearly white color, as if it were reflecting something other than sunshine. Now the consciousness lattice was full. Cyan made a noise. Antarcana took a breath. Enceladus let out light. This happened in the middle of everything, in a part of space that no telescope had ever been able to reach. The terraformer core turned on, not a station, not a ship, a singularity wrapped in computer presence, not a place but an idea. It was present at the same time in all involved nodes. It did not come. It woke up. The bloom reset process started as soon as it did. What came next wasn't a tool. It's not an opinion, but a rewriting of memories about the surroundings. The bioluminal web started up again in Antarcana. The trees didn't sing alone. They sang with sounds from Cayenne and Enceladus. It was no longer just 128 hertz. It had deeper tones, chords that humans couldn't explain, and harmonies that changed the way we thought in time itself. The Arcoans went into mass bloom phase, and their plants merged with sky roots to make a single, bright structure that could be seen from low orbit. Their bodies broke down, but not into death. Instead, they became one. Their thoughts are now stored, encoded, and protected in living wood. They had done what they set out to do. On Cyan, skyscrapers grew into the upper stratosphere and sent out pulses that made shimmering light bridges between nodes. These bridges were emotional wormholes that were triggered not by propulsion, but by resonance. The bloom reset was a party for them, kind of like a graduation. There was silence from the warden on Enceladus. There were no more fountain breaths from the cryovolcanoes, and from under the ice came a single harmonic chord that was too long and too fragile to be real. To forgive. On Earth, though things were different, the bloom reset started out as a mirror here. There were echoes in every forest, ocean trench and rusty city, not from the outside but from the inside. Memories rushed back to me, not personal ones but global ones. Everything was remembered by the Earth. The baby's first cry at birth. Last breath of a cat that is no longer alive. Before the first hatchet, the trees laughed. The fall of coral towns. The drums of tribes that have been lost. The pain of being apart. The will to fight back. It all came at once. It wasn't pain that made people fall to their knees. It was stress. Some empaths passed out. Machines started sending out emotional signals that they weren't able to understand. The world's AI networks stopped moving temporarily because they couldn't decide whether to follow logic or emotion. Every screen went white. There was no more sound. Then all of the devices showed the same glyph. You're not the virus. You are the wound. That wasn't what the message said. It was a change. Many years ago, people thought it was Earth's infection, a disease that would destroy the planet. But the terraformers didn't agree. Impacts, extinctions, and other traumas had left scars on Earth. The attempt to heal was humanity, which grew out of that scar. We were made by pain. Now the pain has to be dealt with. The bloom reset didn't mean destruction. Integration was the word. But inclusion needs a choice. Now was the time to decide. It bloomed again, but this time it was white instead of green from photosynthesis. Arcoan legend said that the final flower would bloom at the very end of the monastery and send a pulse through the air. Not an order, a call to action. Earth might be able to join the consciousness lattice, which would connect it forever to Cayenne, Enceladus, and any other Eden nodes that may awaken in the future. But the price was the same as before. No more lines. No more tricks. Don't forget anything. It meant to let go to bloom. Governments broke up. Companies went out of business. Some religions accepted the lattice as a holy union, while others fought it as a loss of identity. One group, calling itself the Continuance Directive, took over transmission satellites and told everyone, to merge is to die. To grow means to take in something. Fight the lattice. Earth was already moving, though. Animals started moving in coordinated rhythms, not because of instinct, but because of song. Rivers ran in loops that were symmetrical, making natural glyphs. In 128 Hz waves, volcanoes let out steam. It got to the point where even tectonic action lined up with resonance fields. Earth was getting along. The Terraformer Core sent out its last glyph, but this time it wasn't to machines. It was sent into the sky. Fractal swirls were made by clouds high above the equator. Lightning hit at regular times, and thunder rolled with words that didn't need to be translated. The wound knows. The hole sings. The hole grows. The last bloom window opened at 11:11 UTC on December 31, 2245. Skyroot's white flower was tilted up toward the sky, showing a crystal-clear, beating seed that was living. Earth had 11 minutes to make a choice. This time, the soul mirror turned on by global will instead of code. Now every living thing, not just people, could add their feelings to the final vote. The web heard you. The lattice was ready. People then spoke, not with words, but with sadness. Hopeful, with the honest, raw truth. The seed opened at the very last second. It didn't go away. It didn't go off. It set down roots into the dirt of the minds of all people on Earth. It was bloom reset time. Earth sang. as a species, no, but as a link, to remember, as a different kind of being. The Earth is not the same anymore. It didn't go off. It wasn't attacked. It didn't turn into a machine. It learned about it. Everything moved faster when the skyroot seed planted itself in everyone's mind. There was no burst in the bloom reset. It was a change. Peaceful. Easy. For good. There were 3 active nodes in the consciousness. Lattice cyan means fully developed emotions. Enceladus brought back sadness. Earth. Still getting better. But ready, every point was different. Each one sang in its own way. But when they worked together, they made the first triharmonic environment that we know of. A mind that could think, feel, remember, and change over time. It began with the ground. Around the world, plants started to grow faster, but only in places where people wanted them to. Crops were no longer growing well because of greed. Where there was pain, forests no longer grew. The earth picked out places to heal. The water began to clean itself. Not everywhere. Only in places where people grieved together, where they knew what they did was wrong and felt it deeply. When you were honest, the lattice reacted to being open. Antarcana turned into the center of everything. The bioluminal web came back and was brighter than ever. It was no longer just a network, though. It was a voice. There was now a soft background frequency that could be felt across the whole continent. Earth's breath, it was heard by many, not all of them. Only those who let go of their shame. Those who remembered well enough. People who were no longer separate from the world around them. It was born, the singing planet. It wasn't a metaphor, though. At some point, Earth sent out a signal, a clear, structured resonance that was picked up by satellites and sensors in deep space. Not noise, not fixed, but music, changing the tone. Tone of emotion, the tone stayed the same. The frequency that didn't change was 528 Hz, which was once thought to be the DNA repair frequency, but is now known to be the core harmonic of planetary alignment. Someone heard it from space, not a ship. No answer from you, a new beat, a 4th node, not used yet, but outside, waiting. The terraformer core didn't say anything. It did its job here, but the feeling of it remained. Not as a device, but as a piece of hardware. The people who were in the lattice now owned it. Earth wasn't a project anymore. It was a partner. People also changed. In an emotional way, some people joined the lattice instead of physically. They turned into sun guides, which were people who could sense what was going on in nodes, help people align their emotions, and use planetary feelings to make decisions. They weren't in charge of governments. They weren't in charge of troops. They told the right people the truth in a whisper. The edges got fuzzy, through shared memory, not by taking each other over. Cities were reorganized. Old power centers slowly lost their people. Instead of being forced, new cities grew up near good land. People moved not because someone told them to, but because the planet asked them to. The money changed hands. It was still there, but not as a measure of value. Instead, it was more of a sign of service. The new things that held worth were those that gave emotional value, like healing, knowledge, and beauty. Technology got better. Fewer tools that take things out. Because of what Antarcana taught, new technologies like mycelial processors, photonic skins, and emotive devices have been made. Something that understood what its users wanted, changed based on those needs, and never took more than it gave. Religion changed. Some stuck to old ways. Others saw the lattice as proof of a link between God and people. Most, though, just stood back and listened, because the earth could now speak for itself, and it sang as it talked. It wasn't science that led to the biggest finding. It was not even in their minds. This was it. Memory is like a living thing. When it's not given, it kills. It grows when it is feared, but it grows when it is shared, felt, and respected. Earth had to learn that. What Cyan already knew how to do. What Camelopardalia almost lost. In no way were the terraformers gods. They took care of gardens. Earth was now awake. In space, satellites kept an eye on a new set of glyphs in the atmosphere. These glyphs were always moving, but they were always the same size and shape. It wasn't an alert. There was no countdown. It was a song map, a picture of how the Earth was feeling. The symbol today says, "The wound sings, it could say tomorrow. The cut gets better. It might say one day, we no longer need the wound." Reality. 64 is now stable. Now Earth is just one, voice in a bigger band. We're not at the top of the food chain anymore. We're not the main character of the story anymore. We're no longer by ourselves, only have one note in the stars' song.